Oh, nice. The Mass Effect trilogy is only $6 right now. I don't think I have it on Steam, so I've got to add it to the collection. Alright. Done. Let's see how many games I've got. Ah! 1,000! Neat. What's going on, everybody? My name's Lucas, and as you can see, over the past 10.4 years, I've accumulated over 1,000 games on Steam alone. Now you might be asking, Lucas, my man, how in the world do you find all the time to play all of these games? Well, let me tell you, I don't. There's like way too many games. What, are you out of your mind? But that all changes starting today. Yes, dear viewer, I'm challenging myself to try every single game in my Steam library, and I'll be documenting it all right here. I'll be keeping up with a spreadsheet, taking notes, and determining what's really worth coming back to in this massive backlog. So I hope you'll join me on this journey, and without further ado, let's jump into our first set of games. Alright, so first up we have 100 Hidden Turtles. This one's a short and relaxing hidden object game where the goal is simple. Find 100 hidden turtles. Look, there's one now. I really enjoyed this one. It only took about 20 minutes to complete, the music was great, and the art was a joy to take in. It was such a pleasant experience that when I was done, I went ahead and bought pretty much all of this developer's other X-hidden whatever games, since they were all on sale for only a few cents each. I will definitely be playing these from time to time when I want a short, relaxing, art viewing experience. 10 turtles out of 10. Moving on, we have 1954 Alcatraz, a decent point-and-click adventure game, though it starts off a little rough, and the writing can be somewhat hit or miss at times. I enjoyed this game, but it lacked polish. For example, the game doesn't tell you that you can right-click to examine things, and I didn't realize I could do that until about halfway through the game when doing so is required to progress. I just didn't know that it was possible. It's worth finishing, and there are multiple things that can play out slightly differently from playthrough to playthrough, so I may play it again someday. It is pretty rare to see a game focusing on beat generation counterculture, though the term beatnik wasn't actually coined until 1958, but who cares. Unfortunately, achievements stopped working about halfway through the game. I assume this has to do with the fact that I started playing the game on my Windows 10 laptop and finished on my Windows 11 PC, but regardless, I give this game 6.5 beats per nick.
I know I've been bad, but let me make it up to you, okay?
Next up we have 1990X, a game without mechanics. This subtitle makes no sense. This game's kinda strange. For instance, you hear this music, right? Yeah, that's not a mistake, that's the vibe they're going for. This game is all about the main character knowing you're controlling her movements and working with her to figure out what's going on. The game starts off pretty slow and can be fairly tedious. However, the game is weird enough and just creative enough to keep me playing. The game is only a few hours long, and it still feels like it drags a bit at times. It was obviously made by someone with little experience because it breaks a lot of fundamental game design conventions. Like, for instance, when you walk up through a door, naturally, you should be oriented in the same direction when you get to the next screen. In this game, however, you'll often end up facing the wrong direction. The game ends up hitting you with some emotional scenes, and it left me feeling guilty for ever stopping playing. Damn it. In all, I think this game thinks itself to be a lot more philosophically significant than it actually is. I doubt I'll come back to this one, but it's alright. 5.5 out of 10. Coincidentally, game number 4 in the series is 4D Minesweeper. This game was confusing at first because it came with absolutely no instructions, just like regular Minesweeper, but once you learn the rules through trial and error, it's fairly engaging. Not much to say here. It's an interesting take on Minesweeper, and it's a decent little time-killer puzzle game. I'd play it from time to time, and I'll give it a 10 minus 4D mines out of 30 over 3D. Next is... oh no. It's here. The Reaper of Time. Run! Don't let it get its grip on you. It's adventure capitalist. Dear God, help me! I can't stop clicking. This is the most addicting game ever made. For some reason. This game is a black hole of time. You start playing, you'll never stop. You'll never stop. It's terrible and wonderful, and I must resist its siren call.
Most indubitably, good chap. I do say I give this game $1 vigintillion out of 10.
Seriously, the only reason I stopped playing Adventure Capitalist that day was because my power went out. It is now a different day. And next we have Adventurer Manager, a pleasant little indie management / turn-based RPG. This one's fairly well designed, with a lot of systems and decent tutorials. The game is charming, but a little grind-focused, and grind doesn't usually do it for me. But I do like this game, and I could see how it could be really addictive for the right type of person. For me, it's fun in very short bursts, but I think I'd be a lot more into it if it had a more in-depth storyline. As it stands, it's not super memorable, but it's not bad. I'd give it a 6 out of 10. The next game is Age of Empires, an RTS classic. I cannot tell you how many hours I spent playing this as a kid. Mainly because I was a kid and I didn't keep hourly logs of any specific game that I played at the time. But if I had to estimate, probably around 100 hours, maybe more. This game is amazing. I particularly enjoyed the Greek campaign when I was younger, and I love how the series teaches you a little bit about history as you play. It really made me curious to learn more about the cultures I was playing as when I was younger. This game holds up very well today, and I never have a bad time when I play it. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10 here, but only because I know the games that come after it are just as good, but with added gameplay features and presentation. Age of Empires 2. This one took everything that was great about the first game and turned it up a notch. The gameplay is even deeper here, and the presentation is much better. There's voice acting in campaign missions now, and even greater mission variety. However much time I spent playing the first game, you could probably double that to figure out how much time I've spent playing Age of Empires 2 on the original disc. Not to mention, this game has had an amazing amount of support over the year, which I never expected. This game was originally released in 1999, then re-released in 2013 with all new campaigns, then fully remastered in 2019. And that definitive edition is still receiving major official expansions as of 2024. This game still feels great to play, no matter what version you play. 9 out of 10. And on to Age of Empires 3. This one has a much more character-driven approach than the other games in the series, and it leans even further into historical fiction. I didn't play this one quite as much because when it came out in 2005, my computer couldn't run it smoothly, if at all. Now, however, I think this is a really solid game, and I would very much like to finish it at some point. I've played through Act 1 of the first campaign, and I had a great time with it. The presentation reminded me a lot of Age of Mythology, which we'll get to soon enough. I liked some of the new mechanics, such as the Home City, which allows you to build a deck of bonuses that you can have sent to you at various points during the game. You can also customize your home city in between missions as you gain experience in the overall game, which I thought was a nice way of connecting you to that mechanic in a more meaningful way. Overall, I could see myself spending a good amount of time in this game. I'll give it another 8 out of 10. Age of Empires 4, the newest in the series, and I'm happy to say that it does not disappoint. This game is amazing! It's simultaneously a return to form for Age of Empires and refreshingly new feeling. Everything flows so well in this game. Features like hotkeys and unit grouping, which have been present in prior games in the series, feel genuinely useful now. I had no idea you could group different units to a numerical key in the prior games until I played this one, since they actually tell you how to do it in the campaign this time. There's a very functional hotkey for just about everything, and that makes me actually use the keyboard, which I never did in the previous games. This game also finally includes high ground advantages and disadvantages in combat, which adds yet another layer of strategic tactical planning. This game feels like you're playing a documentary, and I love that. Before each campaign mission, a live-action cutscene plays, showing the locations of the battles in the present day. Then during the mission, the same lady who narrated the cutscene also narrates the battle as if it were an actual documentary. It is truly one of the most interesting ways I've seen a real-time strategy game presented. Then, after you beat a mission, you unlock even more historically relevant videos, as well as additional written historical context. This game really knows exactly what it is. It's unique, yet familiar, and a truly smooth experience with spectacular presentation. 10 out of 10. Well done. Following that, we have Age of Mythology, one of the best RTS games ever made, with an amazing campaign stretching across 3 major mythological pantheons. It has an excellent storyline and great scenarios level to level. Act 1 starts in Atlantis and Greece and focuses on the Greek pantheon. Then, in Act 2, our heroes find themselves in ancient Egypt, where some mechanics have changed, and the Egyptian pantheon has become the focus. The third act of the game sees our heroes in the frigid north, again with some substantially varied mechanics, which keep the game feeling fresh. Now focusing on Norse mythology, which makes it easily my favorite part of the game. I honestly love how the game changes things up throughout, because it keeps things from feeling too repetitive or tedious. I played this so much when I was younger, and I even dabbled with the level creator. I really enjoyed the story they told here, and how they pretty seamlessly linked the various mythologies to get something quite unique. I haven't gotten to the extended campaigns yet because I'm replaying the base game first, but I'm really excited to see what they've added. Breaking news, I've just been informed that Age of Mythology is getting a remake that's coming out September 4th, 2024, and I am incredibly excited about that. I love this game. 10 Hydra heads out of 10. Next up is Age of Wonders. This one is not actually in the same series, nor is it made by the same developers as the other Age of games we've been discussing, but nonetheless, this game seems to be of pretty high quality. The only issue really being that on modern hardware, this game is prone to inexplicably crashing. It crashed 4 times in the first hour that I played it, and I lost progress every time. Eventually, I ended up having to edit just 3 little hexadecimal values, and it seems to have stopped the game from crashing. The only time it does now is when I click on a different monitor, which can make recording a little bit more tedious, but aside from that, runs fine. This game is really cool though. It feels like a mix between Baldur's Gate 1 and Civilization 3, which is right up my alley. It rewards you for exploration, and there's a lot of different ways you can approach things. I'll definitely want to come back and finish this one. 8 out of 10. Alright, and now we have AI the Somnium Files. I am really enjoying this one so far. It's kind of like a more adult Ace Attorney, but with less litigation and more investigation, mystery, and sci-fi elements. It seems like it's actually doing a branching storyline well, which can be a hard thing to do. I don't want to stop playing this, and I can't wait to play more. My only nitpick is that the driving scenes are a little immersion breaking, due to the static buildings in the distance and the infinite road. It just seems not quite up to the level of polish that everything else is. But overall, oh my gosh, I'm loving it. 9 out of 10 so far. Next is the Albino Hunter, not to be confused with the Albino Hunter. Punctuation. It's hard. This one seems like a fun and humorous fourth-wall-breaking JRPG. It borders on parody of the genre, but it's good enough to be worth playing. Some of the monsters are peaceful, and you can choose not to fight them. I thought this was pretty cute and interesting, because some of these passive creatures are placed in your way, and without fighting them, you can't get the loot behind them. For me, this appeal to my conscience was enough to deter my usual need to open every chest and get every item in the game. So I'm very interested to see if the game does anything else like that. I think when I'm in the mood for an old school JRPG, I'll really enjoy this one. So yeah, I'll come back when I'm in the mood. I'm going to give what I've played so far a 7 out of 10. Our next game is Alchemy Garden, a cute 3D Stardew Valley-like game with crafting and shop mechanics. It's cozy. It needs a bit more in terms of characters to make the game feel more alive. If all you want to do is customize your house to make it feel ever more cozy, then this might drag you in. For me though, it felt a bit insubstantial. Very lacking in the story department. Some people could probably find a lot of joy in this one, but it feels like a little bit of an early access game. Like I said, it's cute. It just didn't do enough for me. 4.5 out of 10. And our final game for today will be Algo Bot. This is an amazing optimization puzzle game. It feels like problem solving for coding because you essentially have to set everything up beforehand, run your code, see what breaks, and fix it if necessary. It was much more interesting than expected, and I will definitely be coming back to finish this one. It's not too difficult, but some of the levels can be a bit challenging to finish with the fewest possible amount of instructions. It's got a decent story which provides good enough reason for the puzzles to be completed. It's an amusing game and I'll definitely be finishing it. I'm giving this one a 9 out of 10. And to be clear about these ratings, I'm mainly basing them on how much I think the game is worth coming back to, as well as how much I personally enjoyed each game. Hence, radically different games will occasionally receive the same rating, even though comparing them side by side would be like comparing apples and bananas. We have Alien Isolation. This one takes place 15 years after the original movie, in the year 2137. You're playing as Ellen Ripley's daughter Amanda, on a mission to find the black box from the Nostromo in hopes of finding out what happened to her mother. This game is awesome. There is an insane level of ambiance here, and it does a great job of feeling true to the original film. The attention to detail is incredible. The xenomorph feels very sophisticated in this game, which makes the player feel like they are truly in danger at all times. On top of that, the threat of working Joe androids and even other humans keeps the player on their toes and in a nearly constant state of semi-alert panic. I will say though, once you get access to the flamethrower, you can kind of bully the xenomorph, which can be pretty amusing, but that'll only get you so far. Alien Isolation never lets you feel too overpowered. This game feels great to play, and I love the way it expands on the lore and history of the Alien franchise. It is genuinely a tense and thrilling experience that stays true to the universe it's set in. 9 out of 10. Next up, let's talk about a much less beloved Alien title, Aliens Colonial Marines. And in all honesty, so far this game is actually pretty fun. The game handles pretty well, and it's not nearly as bad as people made it out to be around the time of its release. The acting in it is pretty good so far, and I like the progression system. As you play, you level up and use upgrade points to buy attachments for your guns, allowing you to customize the feel and performance of your favorite weapons. The weapon variety is also pretty decent. I also enjoyed the mission variety. For instance, there's a pretty good stealth section where you're making your way through some flooded tunnels, avoiding xenomorphs, some of which are incredibly still, and seem to be just husks. If they detect you though, they'll chase you down and explode on top of you, which in itself is pretty startling. I found myself enjoying it up until the mech loader fight, which I thought would be awesome, but turned out to be tedious and janky. The giant xenomorph takes way too many hits, and it is incredibly easy to just be killed by the tiny fast-moving drones. I found the best way to win in this fight was to stunlock the alien in a corner where the drones don't bother you for some reason, and even then, I got lucky when I actually beat him. It felt far from badass, which is just a shame. It was such a wasted opportunity to make the player feel really cool. The best I can give this game is a 6.5 out of 10. I do want to finish it, but some of the jank really soured the experience for me. Next, I want to talk about a much more recent game, Aliens Fireteam Elite. This is a very fun, squad-based multiplayer third-person shooter. It feels like Left 4 Dead, only much better in my opinion, with a more interesting setting. You can also play solo with bots, which is great for the game's longevity. I also enjoy that even with other players, it's paced well enough that one teammate can't just run ahead triggering all the dialogue and ruin the level for you, like I've experienced in a lot of other online co-op run-and-gun shooters. There's some hidden intel to find that helps flesh out some more of the lore, which I'm always a fan of. One thing I have to criticize is that they didn't even bother to animate characters' mouths moving, but I suppose the game knows what it's trying to be and decided that's really not important in the overall context of the game. However, it is pretty immersion breaking. I also find that most of the time the best way to get through the majority of encounters is to find a choke point and secure it, which can get old. This may change as the game progresses, I don't really know, I hope it does, But regardless, I had a good time with this one, and I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Next up, we're going back to the year 2000 with Alien vs. Predator Classic. This is a really interesting first-person shooter. This game consists of 3 separate campaigns where you play as a xenomorph, a colonial marine, and a predator. The first campaign on the list is the Alien campaign, which I think is a questionable choice because playing as the xenomorph can be quite disorienting, albeit very interesting. The level design feels odd because it's as if the place wasn't built with any practical purpose in mind, or at least no purpose a human such as myself can quite make sense of. You see, as a xenomorph, you can hold the control key to seamlessly climb on the walls and ceilings, which means the developers were free to design the most convoluted levels they could think of. And the best part is, there is no map, and when you die, you are sent back to the start of the level, and it is very, very easy to die as a xenomorph. A highly flammable xenomorph. There is one room with a clear purpose, and that is the Alien Hamster Wheel. Woo! Hamster Wheel! You can just keep going and going on this thing. This is great. Man, it never gets old. Still going. This game also has some of the best uber corny FMV videos. I love them.
Damn! You throw all 5 switches? This main gate hasn't budged. We need a bypass key. The engineer had one. He might still be on it. His body is in med lab on level 2. Got that? Level 2.
The Colonial Marines campaign is a lot more comprehensible, and feels like a normal FPS of the era. What I played of it was pretty decent. The Predator campaign is actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed the Predator campaign because it was fast-paced and had the most variety in terms of weapons and tools at your disposal. It also had the best level design. I would say start with either the Predator campaign or the Colonial Marines, and then do the Alien later. Compared to other shooters at the time, this game is quite unique and has a lot of variety to offer. This one's getting another 7 out of 10. And next, we've got Aliens vs. Predator. This one's from 2010. And while its vibe is on point, some of its voice acting really isn't.
Requesting backup. There's some weird shit in here.
Connor, I can give you one man. He's a little clumsy, but he's a Xeno killer, all right. Proceed to the club and give him some fire support.
I think that's mostly due to the game having a silent protagonist, which I'm not a fan of. I think it was a bad decision, and I think that contributed to the lackluster performances of the other voice actors, since they had nothing to react to and build from. Aside from that, the game is actually pretty good. Just like in the last one, we've got 3 separate campaigns for each species, each about 5 hours long. The Colonial Marines campaign was fun. I played through the whole campaign in one sitting, and felt pretty satisfied when I was done. The Predator and Alien are both fun to play as. The Predator is slightly less fun than an AVP 2000, but the Xenomorph is definitely more fun, with more interesting mechanics. I'll definitely be going back to finish the Alien campaign. Oddly, there's no crouching in the game, and the jump is pitiful for the Marines, and weird for the Predator and Xenomorph. Despite the negatives, I really enjoyed this one so far. It had some interesting lore, and I'm pretty likely to come back and finish the other campaigns. 7.5 out of 10. And lastly, we'll wrap things up with the most recently released game, Aliens Dark Descent. It's quite a lot like XCOM, however, it uses real-time with pause combat, and has better stealth mechanics. It also has a better storyline than what I've played of XCOM Enemy Unknown, and it's a franchise that I'm an absolute sucker for. It feels like one of those just one more turn type of games. However, in this case it's more like just one more objective or one more room. I love the variety of tactics you can employ. Hiding from xenomorphs can feel very, very tense, and fighting them can feel very satisfying. I like the pause for special attacks plus the extra planning time that affords you, which feels almost like Mass Effect's combat in a way. I like the variety in upgrades and promotions you can set your team up with, and I can't wait to see how they develop throughout the game. To get around the map quickly and safely, you can utilize the ARC troop transport. While you're in this thing, the xenomorphs can't get you, and will be gunned down automatically by the transport's turret. It's a great addition that makes the game feel a lot less tedious when working your way through a map, and it can be very fun to see xenomorphs walk into its line of sight. The cutscenes are very well done, and I'm intrigued by the plotline so far. I want to keep playing this. This game is great. 9 out of 10. I love it, and I'm going to finish it.
Hurry up, squad! Good job, squad. That was the last.
I had a good time with these games. A lot of them were better than I expected them to be, especially Colonial Marines. Today we're playing... Wait. What was I doing? I can't seem to remember. This note says... talk about Amnesia. So, guess we'll start with the first game, Amnesia: The Dark Descent. This game is atmospheric as hell, with a writing style and setting that remind me of a mix of the original Dracula and H.P. Lovecraft. I really didn't expect to like this game very much, but I was pleasantly surprised. I love that this game has a slow build to horror. Since you play as a character who's taken a drug to erase his memory, there's quite a sense of mystery as you slowly piece everything together through notes and the occasional sight that forces you to recollect the past. The mechanics of the game are also really interesting. You've got a lamp that burns oil and tinder boxes that can be used to light static light sources like torches and candles. But these supplies are somewhat limited. Staying in the light keeps your sanity from depleting, but it also attracts enemies. So you have to strike a balance between being in the light and staying sane, or hiding in the dark. When you lose enough sanity, you begin to experience hallucination-like visual effects, which are really unpleasant, and good enough reason to try to retain your sanity. This game controls really well with mouse and keyboard, and that's coming from someone who almost always prefers to play games with controller. But due to the physics-based way in which you interact with the world, mouse and keyboard is definitely the way to go here. The use of physics-based puzzles is really well implemented here, and makes the player feel all the more immersed. Not to mention the game's excellent sound design. Moving through Castle Brennenburg is eerie and tense, but the game rewards you with calming musical cues whenever you complete a puzzle or a tense situation. Really, anytime your sanity is being restored, you get a nice little bit of calming music to go with it. Early on, there's a level where you make your way through some flooded corridors. However, an invisible creature is there, and it will kill you if you stay in the water for any length of time. So, you have to jump from object to object in order to avoid it. I thought this segment was really neat, and thankfully just short enough not to overstay its welcome. Overall, I liked the puzzly parts of the game a lot more than the being chased by horrific abominations parts. But I did get so absorbed with the game that I finished the whole thing. In fact, I got so absorbed with this whole series that I bought them all and finished all of them. I also loved the excellent audio dramatizations of Remember, which is a set of 5 short stories that serve as a prequel to The Dark Descent. I'll put a link to those in the description because they have a criminally low view count for their quality. The game is better than I expected, and pleasantly so. I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10 and say it had great pacing and superb ambiance. Next up, we have Amnesia: A Machine for Pigs, which is unfortunately a big step down in many regards from The Dark Descent. It seems that it wasn't actually developed by Frictional Games, just published by them, and it shows. It has a more well-decorated world, but the level of interaction is quite diminished. There's a ton of stuff around, but you can't interact with much of it at all, whereas in The Dark Descent, pretty much everything in the environment you could pick up, move around, doors and drawers could be opened even if they didn't lead to anything. If you saw a box in that game, you were free to pick it up and toss it wherever you wanted. You could even build a little box for it if you wanted. I did. It was cozy and safe from monsters. But in a machine for pigs, you're only allowed to interact with very specific things. You can interact with chairs, desk drawers, and a couple of windows, but nothing else. Don't even think of touching that priceless antique vase, or so help me. That is, unless it's absolutely necessary to progress, then by all means, go ahead. You see that giant bear? You can touch that. That's because it's part of a puzzle. You see all the things in this room? You see how you can't interact with any of it, except for this bear? That's because you can move the bear out of the way. That's the only thing that you can touch. Which means all you need to do to progress is figure out which items are interactable, interact with them, and that's it. You've made progress. You've completed the puzzle, or what passes for a puzzle in this game. They also did away with the inventory screen, so there's no picking things up that might be useful later, and on top of that, there's no sanity mechanic in this game.
So how am I supposed to know when I'm going insane? I don't know.
Precious eagle cactus fruit. Help us.
But it doesn't really matter because you never really feel like you're in any kind of danger, and even when you are in danger, you're not in any danger. Just give this guy some space, don't spook him. It's just common courtesy. He's just a good piggy man, yes he is. Okay, bye Mr. Piggy Man, bye. Oh, what a little scamp. These guys are just so silly and non-threatening, it's ridiculous. The game took all the agency you felt in The Dark Descent and threw it out the window. The game has a story it wants you to see, and you're gonna go through it the way the developers wanted you to go through it. The story and lore are a lot less intriguing than in Dark Descent. It feels like they took a more abstract philosophical approach to the writing, which both compels me to learn more, and also makes me feel like it doesn't matter at all, just because of the way that they've chosen to convey the story. The game also crashes a lot on modern hardware. First of all, with both The Dark Descent and A Machine for Pigs, to get them running at a proper resolution on my AMD laptop, I had to go into their Steam folders, right-click on the launcher.exe, go to Properties, then the Compatibility tab, then change High DPI Settings button, then check the box for High DPI Scaling Override, otherwise I couldn't get the game to run at the correct resolution in full screen. The real problem, however, was that every time you would pass through a loading screen, the game decides it just can't be bothered and crashes. The game also does its autosave right after loading screens. So, when the game crashes, you're stuck replaying that whole level unless you save and quit. So, to get around these crashes, you need to save and quit when you get to a door with a loading screen, which thankfully shows you an icon so you know when they're coming. Then, you've got to lower your settings all to low, change the resolution to specifically 800 by 600, then restart your game for those changes to take effect. Then, go through the loading screen. You've still got a chance that it'll crash, but it's likely you'll get through. Then, once you get through that loading screen, you can raise your settings all back up to high, put it at the proper resolution, and restart your game again. Then you can keep going till you get to the next loading screen and have to do it all over again. The game crashed 27 times in my time with it, and I couldn't even get past a crash near the end of the game, so I eventually had to give up and watch the last 30 minutes of the game on YouTube, and I really don't feel like I missed out on anything. I didn't try A Machine for Pigs on my desktop, so I don't know, it may play nice with that hardware, who's to say. I didn't enjoy the game enough to find out. At the end of the day, A Machine for Pigs is very linear. It's not super intriguing, and the crashes are infuriating. 3.5 out of 10. It's not horrible, but it's not good either. It's a walking simulator that is thankfully not very long. The lore is somewhat detached, and while some of it does feel like it fits with the rest of the series, namely the Aztec stuff, a lot of it just feels off. As far as Amnesia games go, this one just doesn't do it for me. Next up, we're taking a look at Amnesia Rebirth, a game that I actually didn't realize existed until I bought it on sale along with The Bunker after playing Dark Descent. This one is really good. Definitely the most lore-rich in the series so far, and I love that. Yes, lore, give me my precious lore. The interactivity with the environment is back and better than ever. You even get an achievement if you break enough irreplaceable antique vases, so yeah, they know what's up. It's also the most graphically impressive with some great visuals. To some degree, it trades in the Lovecraftian and Gothic vibes of Dark Descent for more Giger-esque elements in the latter half of the game, which I think really fits. The monsters in this one are genuinely unnerving and threatening, which is refreshing coming from a machine for pigs where most of the enemies couldn't even be persuaded to harm you if you tried. Hi little pigman, hi again, how you doing? Good boy, good piggy man. Okay, bye Mr. Piggy. The darkness feels legitimately dark, and the sanity mechanic of Dark Descent has been replaced with fear mechanic. This causes black tendrils to creep into your vision, your breathing becomes more rapid, and your heart beats in your ears. I love that fear kicks in a variety of fear-inducing situations, not just in the dark, but also while you're high up on a ledge or staring at a mangled corpse or a horrendous monster. There were actually a couple instances that raised my heart rate. There were also a few unexpected jump scares, which was great since my problem with jump scares is that you can usually see them coming from a mile away. They're usually always incredibly predictable and rarely accompanied by actually threatening situations. But here, they're not overdone. They work. The storyline was pretty unique, and presents the player with a few really interesting ethical dilemmas and philosophical ideas. In all the ways a machine for pigs failed to make me philosophically intrigued, Rebirth succeeds. I don't want to spoil too much because this one is the most story-heavy, and I think that sort of thing is best experienced for oneself. Your character is an artist, and as she remembers things, she sketches them in her notebook. I really liked the sketches in addition to notes and audio. This game also has some of the best voice acting in the series, and also the biggest variety of voiced characters and voiced notes. And as someone who mainly listens to audiobooks these days, I love that. I'm here for it. Rebirth is a worthy sequel to Dark Descent, and definitely the most closely connected in the series so far. This is probably my favorite in the series from a story perspective, and I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10. And rounding out our look at the Amnesia series, we've got the latest title, Amnesia: The Bunker. This one's set in a World War I French bunker that happens to be inhabited by a horrible bulletproof mole monster that stalks its dark corridors. And ooh baby, this is a really good game. It has a great sense of exploration and world interaction. The game is based around a centralized safe room that has a lantern which functions as a save point, and a generator that requires fuel to power the lights. You have to manage the amount of lights you have powered on, because the more there are, the faster the generator burns fuel. And trust me, you do not want to be in the middle of a sublevel when the power goes out. There's a good variety of items scattered around, some of which can be combined into more useful items like the classic Molotov cocktail, good for all of your immolation needs. These babies will burn right through any mutated rats and the bodies they feast upon. Now just 12 easy payments of $19.99. But wait, there's more. If you craft right now, I'll throw in the patented Deluxe Rat Begone Torch, guaranteed to make those suckers scurry away in no time. I love that you can approach things in a lot of different ways, and you don't feel locked into doing anything you don't want to do. Progression through the game feels very organic, almost Metroidvania-like in a way. You can go wherever you want, but certain places and items are locked behind having tools like a wrench or bolt cutters, and if you don't have them, you'll have to remember to come back later. Often, letters and photographs will contain helpful context for what's going on or where things have gone that people have left behind. All the locker and door codes are randomized for each playthrough, which I think is a great way to keep the player from relying too heavily on guides. The main criticism I have for this game is that I don't like the lack of autosave. Nothing is worse than getting most of the way through an area just to die and be sent back around half an hour. That's just not respectful of my time. It happened a couple of times, but aside from that, the game was very tense and thrilling, and actually reminded me a lot of Alien Isolation. I love that when you beat the game, you unlock a New Game Plus, in which you can set a custom difficulty with a ton of different parameters. My issue with there not being an autosave feature can easily be fixed in New Game Plus, with the option to add save lanterns in each of the sub-areas. That seems like it would go a long way to eliminating any of the potential tedium. If you want the monster to be super aggressive and the rats to be very passive, you can set them to be how you like. I think the complete difficulty customization is a great addition to the game that, along with inherent randomness of the game's items, makes me way more likely to play this one again. Though it doesn't have nearly as much lore as The Dark Descent or Rebirth, it does a good job of displaying a more personal story directly resulting from the lore established for the universe it's set in. I had a great time with this one, and I'm giving it another 8.5 out of 10. The gameplay here was definitely my favorite in the series, and it was absolutely the one that kept me most on edge. And that'll do it for Amnesia. I'm really glad I finally gave these games a try. I suppose I had imagined them being a lot more frustrating with less interesting storylines, and I'm so happy I was wrong. For the most part, they were way better than I expected, aside from Machine for Pigs. Alice Madness Returns. This is a fantastic action-adventure platformer that's nice to look at with fun and interesting worlds and mechanics. It's a twist on Alice in Wonderland, except here Wonderland is corrupted and Alice is a badass goth girl. This is something high school me would have spent hours playing while listening to the Black Parade or something like that. I love the aesthetic they went with for Alice. When you're low on health, you enter Hysteria mode, where you deal more damage and enemies can't hurt you, but it also makes Alice turn white with darkness pouring from her eyes, and it just looks so awesome. This game has a lot of collectibles, and I love collectibles, so this pleases me. There are little bits of jank here and there, but the game is good enough for me to overlook that. For example, the combat features a lock-on function, which locks both the camera and your attacks to an enemy. I think the camera gets a bit too locked on, which makes seeing what other enemies are doing somewhat difficult, and that's annoying, but not too annoying for me to get really frustrated. Alice Madness Returns is really fun, and this is definitely one game I will be coming back to finish. 8 out of 10. The only reason I stopped playing when I did was because the game unexpectedly crashed, which I'm not sure if it was the game's fault or something else I was doing, so. Moving on, we've got Amanda the Adventurer. This one I got through my Humble Choice subscription, so I didn't really pick it out specifically. It's a horror mystery puzzle game that evokes nostalgia for those of us who were kids in the 90s and early 2000s. It seems like it relies pretty heavily on shocking corruption of innocent things style horror, and I don't know, it just felt kind of distasteful to me.
That's right. The tree stump is dead. Dead is the opposite of alive. Good job!
I did appreciate the effort that clearly went into this game, especially the live-action cutscenes and the sound design. And I will say, they did a good job on the VHS effects and the mimicry of the weird low-budget 3D animation of the period. The puzzles, which are the main thing this game has going for it, were decent, if somewhat simple. It took me 2.3 hours to get all 19 achievements, if that tells you anything. They're apparently making a second one, and I can see it having an audience that would be very into it, but this sort of thing just isn't for me. 3.5 out of 10.
It's me, your friend, Skip, and with me, as always, is my trusty dog, Chip.
Anarcute is next, and it's a bit less cute than you'd expect with a title like that. It's a game along the lines of Pikmin, in that you control a mob of tiny creatures that you direct to complete objectives. However, it's more combat-focused, and there's no time limit. It has really, really repetitive music that can be kind of off-putting after a while. The chibi characters are indeed cute, but the camera is so far away you don't fully get to appreciate how adorable they are during gameplay. It's decently fun, and it has some simple but entertaining puzzles and power-ups. I think it's a fine game, but not something I'm dying to complete. I'd give it a decent 6.5 out of 10. It's fun enough. Following that, we've got Alt Frequencies, a game about free will and politics with some really unique gameplay. This game had an interesting premise. You play as a radio listener in a time loop, who is immune to the time loop, trying to change events by informing people about things. You do this by recording parts of live broadcasts and sending them to other live broadcasts. It's a very unique game mechanic that I would like to see implemented in a more in-depth game, because as it stands, this game lacked a bit in terms of how much content it had to offer. The game does have a few choices to make, and it has 2 different endings, but it's mostly linear after you've listened to all of a chapter's broadcasts. There just isn't as much variability as I would have liked to have seen from a game of this style. It does make a few good points about politics, the world around us, and some of the ways people handle things, but I think it just needed more. I'd like to replay this one, making the few alternative choices to the ones that I made in my first playthrough, and luckily that won't be much of a chore because the game is only around 3 hours long, with a second playthrough likely being much quicker. I'll give this one another 6.5 out of 10. Not bad. Just needs more.
Speaking of time loops, let's talk about 5D chess with multiverse time travel.
This is a super interesting chess variant. It plays out like a regular chess game, except each move creates a new board on a timeline. Pieces can travel back in time to previous boards, which creates a branching timeline. There are rules that determine which timelines are active and which are currently not, meaning sometimes it's in your best interest to split the timelines to deactivate a timeline in which you're losing and activate one where you have the advantage. The goal of the game, as usual, is to get a checkmate on one of your opponent's kings in any timeline. You can, of course, move a piece from one timeline to another. For instance, here, I can move my king from this timeline to another, keeping him from ever being able to be in check in one timeline, but giving my opponent twice as many targets in another. Sometimes you'll feel like you're in a hopeless situation, but you can jump timelines into a checkmate and very suddenly win the game. I did notice that the more timelines were created, the slower the computer processed its next move, and the game performed significantly better on my desktop than it did on my laptop. It seems that sometimes keeping the timelines more condensed can be your best route to victory, but sometimes games can drag on for a very long time. This game is fun and fascinating. I'm giving it an 8 out of 10. Up next, we've got Anime Tanks Arena, and what more do I need to say? I got all the achievements in 6 minutes. Game of the year, 2 out of 10. Moving on. And next we've got Antenna, which is also incredibly short at just around 10 minutes or so. This is a decent little experience with some nice sounds and visuals. You're just a robot fixing some radio signals and antennas in the form of some very small puzzles. It's not bad. It also doesn't do too much. It would have been really cool to see a full-fledged game that was maybe a few hours long, but it was free, so I can't complain too much. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. This feels more like a proof of concept than anything else. Next up is Ancestors Legacy, a fantastic real-time strategy game with some interesting mechanics and a fast-paced, up-close and personal feel. And when I say up close, I mean you can really get up close to the action by pressing the Z key, which enables cinematic camera mode, making battles way more fun to watch. It even makes it enjoyable just to watch your troops run around the map. Unlike in a lot of RTS games, you're not going to be too focused on base building in this one, since all the buildings have preset locations. Ancestors Legacy is focused on action, and does a great job of making your units feel less disposable than in other RTS games. When you train a squad in this game, they don't share a unified health bar, but rather each man in the squad has their own health and can die individually. There are mechanics that let you rest to heal damaged units and train new men to replace those who died in battle, making it easier to keep a unit around in the long term. In addition to that, you can upgrade your unit's armor. However, this comes at the cost of speed, which is pretty realistic. I also like that the characters have context-based responses to your move commands, unlike in Age of Empires where the units just repeat random nonsense phrases like that. Ancestors Legacy also has excellent mission variety. In the time that I played it, I never felt like I was doing the same thing over and over again. Early on, there's a stealth mission that teaches you about the game's really well implemented stealth mechanics. This makes ambushes a much more viable tactic, as well as something to watch out for when moving into enemy territory. That being said, the game plays very well and each unit feels unique enough to be useful. Archers in particular felt great to use.
Archers!
I'm using a red arrow, so I know who I kill.
I love that the game focuses on Vikings, since not many RTS games do. Though, there are 9 full historical campaigns in the game set across a variety of cultures. I haven't gotten to those yet, but I do look forward to playing them. This game is great, and I'm giving it another 8.5 out of 10. Let's talk about Antichamber. This has got to be one of the best puzzle games I've ever played. This is a game that loves to challenge your perception of every situation you find yourself in. Things are rarely as they seem at first glance, and the game highly encourages out-of-the-box thinking. There are many looping paths in Antichamber, and you'll find that sometimes you end up in places you've already been. When this happens, it's likely that a puzzle that you had completed on your journey may have shown you a different way of looking at other seemingly more simplistic puzzles you've already solved. But with your newfound knowledge, you're now able to solve the puzzle in a new way, opening a new path. The game is all about illusions, and it hints at solutions with little self-help style phrases and comic panels on the wall. Those panels show up on a large screen in the starting room, so you can see approximately how many puzzles you've completed, along with a map that can be used to fast travel back to any puzzles that you've already been through. Because the game, in all actuality, is a 3 or more dimensional maze of puzzles. This is not an easy puzzle game. It actually makes you think, and I love that. 9 out of 10. Up next, we've got Aperture Desk Job. This is a short game, around half an hour long, that was made as a tech demo for the Steam Deck. In that capacity, it's great. It shows off the various controls of the Steam Deck and gives you a few laughs in the process. It's also a nice little addition to the Portal universe. Still, part of me really does wish it were longer. I will, however, give it an 8 out of 10. Anodyne is next, and it wasn't quite what I was expecting. It reminds me of an older Legend of Zelda style game, except with modern, semi-satirical writing. The game seems to think it's pretty funny in certain points, but I don't really share that sentiment. A lot of the humor comes off as dry or as someone trying to be ridiculous, but either not going far enough or going a bit too far. Just not quite hitting the mark. It has a kind of empty yet expansive world that was lacking a bit of the charm I was anticipating. I just felt bored playing it. It did have great music though. Very chill. I tried to play a second session of this one, but I just couldn't bring myself to spend the time on it. I just can't get into this game. 4 out of 10. It loses my attention way too fast. Next up is A Normal Lost Phone. It's an interesting concept, finding a lost phone and going through all of its contents to figure out stuff about its owner, but unfortunately, that's just about as tedious as you'd expect it to be. There's a lot of reading through messages that aren't very interesting, because they're just that. Someone's messages. It's not something I would bother to do in real life, especially since I already barely read my own messages. It's painfully exhausting for me to try to read so many of someone else's. I am, after all, very self-absorbed. Not to mention that it's kinda creepy behavior if you think about it, especially since at the end of the game you learn that the person who owned the phone didn't want anyone going through their stuff and finding their secrets. No, couldn't be creepy at all if I just go through all of a random person's files. It just makes us like friends, right? You know, while we're at it, we might as well hack into all of their dating apps. That should really tell us a lot about who our new friend is. What's this? They have an unsent email draft? Well, I've got to help my new buddy out and send their email for them. I'm sure they'll thank me later. You find out more and more about this phone's owner through little clues here and there, until you get to a point where you're explicitly told the person's LGBT secret. And sure, that gives us a little insight into their situation, but honestly...
Who are you? Mustn't ask us, not its business.
The game does have some good messages and information that could help people understand more about people who are different from them, or perhaps it could help someone in that situation feel more understood. So I will give the game that. It did feel creepy though. 5 out of 10. There was way too much in terms of pointless messages that didn't matter at all, and while that does make it more realistic, it also made me very tired going through all that pointlessness. And following that, we've got the sequel, another lost phone. This one, while being similar in concept to a normal lost phone, handled the whole thing a bit better. This one cuts out a lot of superfluous messages, and most of what you get seems a lot more relevant, which makes the game feel like it has much more respect for your time. This one felt much less creepy, because the owner of the phone actually intended for her phone to be found and gone through, and some good can actually come from this. There was still some tedium in going through other people's messages, but at least they were all adults around my age this time, which made it more relatable. It paints the player a decent image of what an abusive relationship might look like, and actually might be helpful to someone in that situation in terms of making them realize some negative behavior patterns. This was much better than the first game in my opinion. I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10. Still not my cup of tea, but better. I would like to see one of these style of games where you play as a detective looking through a murder victim's phone in order to catch the killer and save another victim or something like that. That'd be neat. Anyway, next we've got Assassin's Creed Rogue, which is oddly the only one in the series I own on Steam, though I do own most of the rest of the series on PlayStation and Xbox, aside from the newest games, Origins and onward. This, however, is a fantastic Assassin's Creed game. It's really fun and has a great setting. The Northern Atlantic is a region that doesn't see much representation in games, and I absolutely love it. Very quickly you get access to your ship, the Morrigan, and getting to captain her through a blizzard while engaging enemy ships is just awesome. The ship combat feels great, and there's a great variety of weapons and upgrades for both you and the Morrigan. It's been a while since I've played an Assassin's Creed game. Years actually, and I've never played any with ship combat until now. I'm having a blast with this one. 8.5 out of 10. I'm going to come back to this one soon, but first I think I'll play through Black Flag on the PlayStation since it does take place around 40 years prior to Rogue. Alright cowboy, next we've got Ashes to Ashes. This one drew me in with its great aesthetic but let me down right quick with its terrible voice acting and sound leveling.
Is that a damn skeleton? The devil would come around these parts.
Wait, would both of you shut up?
Back up!
You see that?
Get him! Am I hallucinating or is that a walking corpse?
Whatever it is, kill it!
I also encountered consistent crashes at certain points, which made me have to avoid certain areas entirely. They had a neat idea of using bullets with different elemental effects. However, you have unlimited ammo with no reload, so you can just set up all the elemental bullets in the revolver and just start blasting.
I started blasting. Bang, bang.
It really felt like an unfinished student project, and what do you know? Turns out it is. It was free and short, so in light of that, I'd say not bad. And since it was a student project, I think this game could definitely be iterated upon to make an actually good game somewhere down the road. In its current state though, I don't really want to play it again. It is very rough around the edges. The particle effects were completely overwhelming to the point I couldn't tell what was going on most of the time.
Well, I don't see so good, so I missed.
Another somewhat more hilarious environmental detail was that anytime something exploded, like a boulder, the leftover pieces would block your path until they eventually melted out of existence like ice cubes. It was a very odd, but amusing way of handling debris. Other than that, the art direction was pretty good. The music was also pretty good, standard Western fare. I think this is a solid proof of concept, but needs serious development time and refinement with all new voice actors, but the concept has potential. 3 out of 10. Keep going. We've got another student game next, and that is Anyu. This game was very pleasant to look at, but was also unfortunately plagued with glitches, though no full-on crashes this time. Every time the game loaded a new scene, most of the settings would revert to default, which meant I had to re-enable VSync every few minutes and take the game out of and back into full screen mode for that change to take effect, in order to prevent some pretty terrible screen tearing. The story was neat but underdeveloped, with the ending feeling like it came out of nowhere. For a student game, I think it was pretty well done. It was a pleasant experience that just needed some finishing touches. The game took around an hour and 15 minutes to finish, though I did waste a bit of time due to the glitches. I'd like to see a more polished full release of this game with some more story content. 5.5 out of 10. Now, let's take a look at Arise, A Simple Story. This is a wonderful piece of art. It tells a heartwarming and very human story that makes me feel so full of emotion. It is joyous and sorrowful and just spectacular. The story is told without words, but rather a series of images collected throughout the game, along with all the other visual storytelling that make the game so universally understandable. It is a beautiful game, both in terms of its story as well as its artwork. The game design is also top-notch. The primary mechanic of this game is time manipulation. You can reverse, fast forward, and pause time, allowing you to alter your environment to forge a path forward. You've also got a pretty neat little grappling hook. This is a super unique 3D platformer puzzle game with puzzles that are both interesting and satisfying. The art style is lovely and the sound design is very well done. The musical score is phenomenally emotive and fits every scene perfectly. This game is 100% worth experiencing. 10 out of 10. I was in tears by the game's end, and anything that can give me a reaction like that is something I can highly recommend. Let's jump right in with Among Us. I'm sure you're already well aware of this social deduction game, but for anyone who might not know, this is an asymmetric multiplayer game where most of the players play as innocent spaceship crew members who just need to perform maintenance tasks, along with 1 or 2 players who play as alien monsters impersonating crew members with the goal of murdering all of the crew. You're told your role at the beginning of the game, and you need to communicate with the other players to determine who the imposter is, so they can be ejected from the spaceship. I first tried playing this game with random people online using in-game text chat, and as you might expect, that doesn't usually go very well, especially when no one will communicate, or they're all speaking a language you don't understand. Plus, having to type everything can just be a pain. However, if you can get a group of friends together on a Discord call, preferably 8 or more, the game can be an absolute ton of fun. We played 8.5 hours straight, and it felt like no time at all. Then I lost all that footage, so we played again for another 5 hours. And at the end of that, we still didn't really want to stop. It's really interesting to try to figure out all of your friends' tells and behaviors when they're telling a lie. For instance, I apparently have a very terrible lying voice, so everyone can immediately tell when I'm the imposter and I'm lying about killing someone. Such a shame. I need to work on that. The misdirection in this game can be very entertaining, and works all the more when there are 2 imposters, and everyone has optional roles like engineer, which allows that crew member to use the vents to move around like the imposter, which can be very confusing at times. It makes it easy for the imposters to claim the one venting is actually the imposter due to their highly sus behavior. It also makes it very easy for the imposter to claim that they're actually the engineer, and you shouldn't worry about them, because they're just the engineer, guys, don't worry. Anyway, this game is so much fun with voice chat, and I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. I really didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did. Though, if you're playing without friends with random people in text chat, I'd give it like a 5. Up next, we've got As Far as the Eye. This is a compelling turn-based management strategy game that really gives you that just one more turn feeling that can be oh so addictive. The goal of the game is to try to help guide your caravan of pupils, as they're called, to the Eye, which is a place safe from the periodic flooding of the world. During your journey, you can develop your pupils to be good at different professions, allowing them to perform various tasks more efficiently, increasing your odds of survival. You'll need to plot your course and accumulate the proper resources to reach your destination. However, you have limited turns before the wave overtakes your caravan, so you have to be strategic in your use of time. This game has a lot of variety and feels very unique within its genre. This one is very laid back and pleasant to look at. It's fun, but it can also be somewhat difficult, and if you forget to make your pupils gather food, well, they'll all die very suddenly. Whoops. Sorry guys. As Far as the Eye is getting an 8 out of 10 from me. On to Astral Ascent, a roguelike side-scrolling action-adventure game that I wanted to like a lot more than I did. The moment-to-moment gameplay was very good, and the roguelike features were well implemented. The game has a lot of fun systems and upgrades during and between runs, the combat performs well, and it feels fun to play. The problem is that its writing is absolutely atrocious, and that lack of decent writing made me feel like the gameplay didn't really matter. The main characters are mostly insufferable. Every time I heard them speak, I just completely lost interest and wanted to be playing pretty much anything else. The way it introduces characters is a jumbled mess. You're immediately dumped into a hub area with a bunch of characters that the game pretends you already know and acts like you should care about them, but you haven't met them, you haven't developed a relationship with them, you know nothing about them. So this form of introduction comes off as entirely forced. Since the game is roguelike, some of the environments can look pretty samey. However, the art and music is actually great. No complaints there. Astral Ascent has a lot of great qualities, but it's dragged down by juvenile and disjointed writing. The execution of the story was incredibly poor, which is really disappointing because I really wanted to love this game. I'll give it a 5.5 out of 10. It's a decent game that could have been great with better writing and better directed voice acting. It also needs more idle animations. And on a much higher note, we've got Astrea, 6-sided oracles. This is a deck-building dice game that reminds me a lot of Slay the Spire in a very good way. The game is about oracles from 6 different planets fighting corruption caused by something within their star. Health bars in this game aren't actually representative of health, but rather purity versus corruption. You can choose to use most dice on either yourself or your enemies. Dice that have the Purify action deal damage to enemies, whereas if you use it on yourself, it would heal you, and vice versa with Corruption healing enemies, but damaging you. Dealing corruption to an enemy also increases their doom level, which adds to the amount of corruption they can dish out. The game is fairly complex with a lot of varying effects, so it's really important to read all the effects of your dice as well as any lingering buffs or debuffs on you or your enemies. In this game, reading comprehension can truly mean the difference between life and death. Deck building with dice is a lot of fun and adds a layer of complexity to the system. When you gain new dice, you usually have the option to choose between 3 different dice, which are categorized as safe, neutral, or risky, with safe having no faces that cause corruption, and risky having a majority that cause corruption. You can also choose to skip a dice reward, and in exchange you receive 10 star shards, which is the game's currency. You can also forge dice, which allows you to customize your dice faces for a price. This allows you to make risky dice far less risky over the course of a run by replacing corrupting die faces with purifying ones. You can also get sentinels, which are helpful little automaton buddies which have their own dice and can be upgraded in certain rooms for star shards. While the story and lore start off strong, it's not consistently in the forefront. The game is very focused on gameplay, and it does a great job in that regard. There's a good variety of enemies with some interesting quirks that make dealing with them a bit less mindless. 9 out of 10. I loved this game. And up next, we're taking a look at Astrologaster. This is quite a unique game, with a pop-up book art style and comedic choir music to introduce each segment of the game. You play as an unlicensed doctor named Simon Foreman during Shakespeare's era, and you diagnose patients based on astrology readings, which oddly seem to work out. The goal for the most part is to impress your patients enough to get them to write you letters of recommendation in order for you to be granted a medical license. You make choices based on readings which can be pretty vague to the point that at times you have no idea what your character is going to say, which can lead to unintended dialogue. That system is somewhat interesting, but I think it could have been implemented in a slightly more clear manner. There were many humorous and unexpected occurrences in this game that made for quite an amusing time. The choir was very funny, and the game was full of innuendo. There were plenty of more emotionally satisfying bits as well, which gave the game a good feeling of balance. What really made it all more intriguing is that the game is based on real historical figures, and the scandalous and ridiculous interactions that truly occurred based on the main character's extensive notes, which have been preserved in Cambridge University. This is a great piece of comedic historical fiction that felt a bit like a play and a bit like a game of deduction. I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10. Following that, we've got Aurion, Legacy of the Kori-Odan. This is an action RPG with a unique African style. It was a Kickstarter-funded game that turned out pretty well. The writing isn't bad, but could use a bit of refinement. You can freely move around the environments, however, when you go into battle, your character is locked into a side-view fighting game / beat-em-up style. The combat is pretty well done, with a lot of complexity and nuance. You can switch combat modes and recharge energy in a way that reminded me of the Dragon Ball Z Budokai games. You can also utilize one of the 2 main characters to heal the other in battle, and later to fire large energy projectiles. The art style is great, however the animations aren't always the most smooth, and remind me a bit too much of old Flash games, aside from during cutscenes where they are more individually tailored to the scene. I really want to love this game, but it just feels very rough around the edges. I think a full-on remaster would be just what this game needs, just a bit of polish. I would love it if this game was voiced, since there is a lot of dialogue, and I would really like to hear it performed. I would also be pretty happy if they turned Aurion into an anime, because that is exactly what it feels like. I think it would translate really well to that medium, and might actually turn out better than the game itself. I really want to like this game, and the more I play it, the more I do enjoy it. I'm giving this one a 6.75 out of 10. Though it can be a bit grindy, the game's systems are pretty good, especially after you unlock some more of both of the characters' abilities. Next up, we're checking out Axiom Verge. This is without a doubt my favorite Metroid-style game. I think I may like it even more than Super Metroid, which is my favorite of the 2D Metroid games that I've played so far. It gives you strong nostalgic vibes while also having modern quality of life features. The game has an amazing sci-fi biomechanical pixel art aesthetic, and the art feels very inspired by H.R. Giger, which I am always here for. And the soundtrack is also phenomenal. I love this game, and it feels very good to play. And the exploration is also very fun. There is some inherent backtracking, but I find it tolerable because the art and sound are so well done. Finding new weapons and tools feels very rewarding because the game dangles little prizes in front of you locked behind certain barriers, and it's always such a good feeling to find what you need to break those barriers and get whatever's on the other side. It's that feeling of, oh yeah, I can use this new thing to get that thing that I saw back there, that feels so satisfying. The lore is also very good, and it's drip-fed to you at a pace that keeps you wondering but not frustrated. There's also an in-game explanation for respawning when you die, which is always so much more immersive than, oh, you died? Okay, well, we'll rewind time for you and you can try it again. There's a lot to like about this game, and I'd highly recommend it with a 9 out of 10. And with that, we've gotten through 50 out of around 1,100 games or so. And I want to thank you so much for watching. It really makes it feel worth it to do these videos knowing that people are enjoying watching them. As usual, I would love to hear about your experiences with these games in the comments below. And if you haven't seen the other videos in this series, you can click on the playlist on screen or in the description to get caught up. As always, remember to like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and have an amazing day. See you in the next one.